Welcome to Cut and Splice. This is Gil. I'm here with Matt and Jason, and this week we're going to be discussing Wild Strawberries. And I think this movie, we've this is a personal favorite of mine, and we've when we started the discussing the idea of doing this podcast, it was one of the movies that we thought that we should do, especially a Bergman movie. And here we are. It took a little while, but we got there. I guess the Jason, Matt, this you both watched it before, right? We've all seen it at an earlier point.
Correct.
I would say that I sort of saw it. You and I went to go see a double feature at the New Beverly. I want to say it was around midnight or something. And this was the second movie that played. I don't remember what the first movie was, but I remember you were like, we got to go see this movie. It's like really good. And that's the only time I had ever seen it. And I was falling asleep, not because it's not a good movie, but because I was super tired. And on the way home, we were talking about it, and I realized as we were talking about it, that I was like, man, I must have missed whole scenes in this movie. Like, I just really did not grasp all of it because I was like definitely passing out throughout it.
Yeah.
So in a way, this was more or less one of the reasons I wanted to see it as well, is because it would be like seeing it for the first time. Really, like I really needed to really sit down and watch it.
It happens to me too with certain movies, so that definitely good to to refresh on it. And also, I'll say at the New Beverly too. Sometimes those double features back then,
Yeah.
I do feel like one of those movies gets lost almost, especially the second one if it's
Yeah.
So yeah.
I remember you were passing out a little bit when we were watching Cliffhanger after Last Action Hero.
Oh yeah, yeah, and that's definitely gonna make me snooze a bit. What
Well,
about you, Matt? Yeah.
one thing that I'll never forget is going to the New Beverly when they had the double feature of Sunshine and 2001: A Space Odyssey, and having a guy sitting in front of us like snoring like a cow during 2001: A Space Odyssey.
First time I'd ever seen that movie too.
Yeah. No, I saw Wild Strawberries, I think, for the first time in college. I've seen it a few times since then. It has been a few years since I've revisited it. It, just for me, in terms of Bergman films, The Seventh Seal was always kind of my go-to. Like if I just felt like, I want to watch a really depressing Scandinavian movie, I'm going to watch The Seventh Seal instead of Wild Strawberries. But no, I mean, it is a movie that kind of hit me from the beginning, and that was probably like, 12 years ago or something, uh, and it stuck with me, and it's something that I was very happy to revisit. And the funny thing is, I only have like one minor technical quibble with the movie. I don't have any storytelling quibbles with the movie. Just one minor technical quibble with the movie, and I really love how it's done technically. So, I mean, this is easily, and like when you get into that territory, that it's a great movie. When you actually have to find something to kind of sort of say, this could have been done better. But anyway, I'll defer to you two for the next few minutes.
Yeah, and as far as me personally, the um, when I got into these types of movies, these foreign films, I went through all the big directors, the Fellini, the Bergman, and there's definitely Bergman was the something about him was always interesting to me because And this is why we also discussed this during the slow movies episodes. As I was saying, how
Mm.
Bergman movies don't give you that much as far as what to engage with. You really have to make an effort to engage with the movies, but not in a bad way. I didn't even correct myself then to say it, but I love his movies, because, and specifically Wild Strawberries, because it's really, I feel like with this movie he really hits the right balance of being
Mm.
accessible, being modern, and just something about it just really works. It's also a road movie,
Yeah.
Mhm.
so a road trip movie, which is always engaging. So it's pretty much as engaging as he gets, but it's still very good. It doesn't feel like a compromise of his style and his storytelling um, way. So, and then surprisingly, I've been surprised because I'm on a Bergman group and like Facebook, and I see people talk about all these movies that they really like of his. And Wild Strawberries, people like it, but it doesn't come up as like, say, a top five for some people. For most people, it seems like, and I'm very surprised because it is my favorite movie of his. I should revisit the Seventh Seal. There's also Winter Light, which a lot of people consider his best movies. So
Mhm.
I guess I should check that one out as well. Uh, but yeah, but this one is my personal favorite, and also I think like a top five of all time movie. Uh, for some odd reason, for the I to relate it in the best possible way, I think it's in the same way that I feel like Punch Drunk Love by Paul Thomas Anderson is my favorite movie of his. Not because it's the best one objectively, but because it's the best one subjectively. It's because I have a very strong connection to what's going in those two particular movies that I just really connected
Yeah.
with. So yeah, and but I do. That's why I'm curious to hear your guys' opinion or general impression before we get into the second part with spoilers. How did you react to it, especially Jason, since you I guess this is technically the first time you've seen it in a way.
Yeah. I really like the movie. The It's a little, maybe just a little slower than I remembered it being, but yeah, I think there's something very warm about it. You know, like something that I real quickly, you said like you kind of were thinking about revisiting the Seventh Seal. I mean, I would be interested in watching that again too. I saw that um a long time ago, and it was like all I really remember are like images of it. I barely remember the movie at all. And it's like such a popular movie, you know. um but this movie, yeah, like I said, there's something about the end when he's in bed and everything at the end of the movie, and it's just like, for being, a movie about an old man and everything, and they are really constantly like doubling down about how his life is like, he's very cold and everything. And by the end of the movie, it's very like affirming in a way. I don't know, it's I really, um I don't, it's hard to really put your finger on it, but I do like the movie quite a bit. It's just it's solid. And the transitions, there's like a lot of transitions between what's actually happening and what he's like remembering. I guess you could call them flashbacks, but they're not really flashbacks, really. They're, in movie terms, they're more like visions or something. He's kind of like seeing stuff that happened, that even stuff that he probably shouldn't even have been able to see. So it's kind of like weird, trippy, like mind game vision type stuff that's going on, and all the transitions are like really good. So I don't know. I have a real positive experience with the movie for sure.
Yeah, it's like projections in a way. Those moments,
Yeah,
because it's a time that he was in, but events that he wasn't part of because he was away. Like you never see the younger version of himself, and it's his psychological projections. The whole movie essentially
yeah,
is it's
Mhm.
yeah, similar to like say, a Citizen Kane only from the point of view of Kane. You know,
Yeah,
like he's
it is
telling his
like that.
own
Yeah,
story. So it's yeah, it's a very cool way, and that's what I mean. On the surface, it's very moment to moment, not that far off from you. You can pretty easily engage with what's going on there, but the technique on the surface, oh, these are flashbacks, but they're not. They're projections, or and the dreams are also not as simple as, so that's what Bergman does. Like he'll do things that on the surface seem like, oh yeah, I've seen that before in a movie, but it's not exactly like that. He really does it in his own way, and it's still sophisticated. I mean, the if we want to like bring up cinematography for a moment, like what he does in the
Okay.
car, like in the car, come
yeah,
on, like the push-ins, push out, a transition.
Yeah.
He'll do a reversal of a character and then go to the memory and then back
yep,
out of the memory. Such cool stuff that
yeah,
it's not that common that people will just shoot in a car and it'll just be like, single. Like he goes all out. He's like, as much as his movies are dialogue heavy and he's almost like a writer first. He's very big on the written word and everything. What he does with the visuals is in a tight car. It's spectacular.
Yeah.
It's very engaging stuff.
Yeah, and especially for 1957, when we didn't have the technology that we have now to just kind of, like throw a car mount on that's like done with suction cups, and you have like a tiny camera, and you can just kind of do everything remotely. I mean, they actually had to do everything by hand, so I mean, all that took a lot of work. So yeah, and when we get into the second portion, I'll get a little bit into my quibble about the technical side, but that is not my quibble with the technical side. So yeah.
But
That
overall, yeah, your reaction to, I mean, the movie, like, as far as,
well, my favorite part of the movie is that it set up a joke for the far superior movie Star Trek First Contact. You know,
okay,
Borg, Borg, it sounds Swedish. Uh, obviously, obviously that's a joke, but uh, 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 yeah, I mean, the main character, his last name is Borg, and it's a Swedish
Borg.
movie, and ha ha, Borg. If you have to explain the joke, it's not a good joke.
you
But
shouldn't have explained it.
I mean, there is so much in the movie that kind of telegraphs a little bit of apathy, or like that like this is not a person who has lived a life of accomplishment but not of substance, and um which seems, I I don't want to stereotype, but it kind of seems like a very Nordic storyline in a lot of ways. It's something that we're just used to, coming from that area of the world. But at the end, you just don't feel like this was a kick in the balls. This is a movie that finally you know comes to a conclusion where okay, well, yeah, there is some meaning in life, even if you kind of let certain opportunities slip through your fingers, and so on and so forth. I mean, again, I feel like I'm being cryptic enough that I'm not spoiling anything, but yeah, there's a healthy amount of melancholy, and there's a healthy amount of beauty in the movie, and I do regard it as one of the better movies, one of the best movies that I've ever seen, and yeah, that's what I have to say at the moment. So yeah,
It's funny. I am looking forward to the second part because it seems like you're setting it up as there's several things that you're not crazy about in it or something, and but then you say it's one of the best movies ever. So that's so it's definitely good
yeah.
to delve into that. Um,
Well. Again, I mean, it's just one of those things where I'm digging for something that I don't like. I'm actually digging to see if there's something that just went wrong. And there are a few things, there are like one or two things that I think that I could point to and say, this could have been done a little bit better. It's not even that it was done wrong. It's just that it could have been done slightly better.
it's funny. It's like we're having a pattern with like with Stardust and Princess Bride, where we're taking these movies that are so good, especially the Princess Bride, and then breaking them apart for issues and flaws. Um,
Well,
yeah, but
I was the one who was kicking the shit out of Stardust, but
oh, for sure. But I still I kicked Princess Bride a bit. So
yeah. So,
and Jason was with me on that. So yeah. So I don't know. We can move on to I mean, for one thing, as far as recommending it, I wholeheartedly recommend it. I actually think it's also a good first Bergman movie to watch because I do think between the road trip aspect to it
yeah.
and it's a modern film. Yes, it's about an old person and it's about essentially um, yeah, which old people will definitely love this movie. It's very for them. But for younger
Yeah.
people, I think there's a lot of value in this movie, and we can get into it in the second part. But yes, I think there's something about this movie that's very accessible and yet extremely subtle, extremely Bergman-esque, extremely sophisticated. So it's an uncompromising vision, but still not being too far off
Yeah.
for
It also says a lot about Bergman that, this is a movie about old age and, what you're leaving behind. And, it is so mature. And yet, Bergman died 50 years after this movie came out. So, I mean, like Bergman was still not an old man when he made this. So
Oh yeah, exactly. Which is why I think it is a good movie for younger people because it comes
yeah,
from that perspective for sure. I
right.
mean, it's multi-generational. That's what the movie is too. So yeah, I mean, and the one thing I'll say as far as ratings, when I went back and I looked at my ratings, I was surprised to find that I rated it a 9, and I immediately bumped it up to a 10, because
Yeah,
there's these few movies that I've rated 10, and a lot of them are not 10 per se, like Back to the Future and Star Wars and some other ones. Like those are more emotional 10s. And Wild Strawberries, and there's a few other, Mulholland Drive is another one, and 2001. Some of those are emotional, but yeah, I felt like yes, Wild Strawberries is not perfect. It probably deserves a 9, but just because of over the years how it evolved in my mind and the fact that it is a top 5 movie for me, or at least I've put it in my top 5 several times, I might as well kick it up to a 10 just for the hell
right.
of it.
I mean, if you consider any movie to be in your top 5 of all
Exactly.
movies of all
Yeah.
time, it better be a 10.
Which is why I was surprised it was a 9. And I think Chinatown is another one that's like top 5, top 10, and I think I might have rated it a 9. So I bumped that one as well. So, what about you guys? Where do you feel it falls for you?
Jason, do you want to go first or should I?
I think it's a like a very solid 8, um, maybe more. Um, I totally agree with you that it's a. Um, I've only seen I think 3 of his films, but I think this would be like the best one that out of those 3 that I've seen. Um, if someone were to pick one to watch and like kind of to try and kind of ease them their way into his movies and just sort of see if they want to explore more of them and stuff. Um, I want to explore more of his movies, but that's that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Seventh Seal is on HBO Max, so you could.
Sweet.
I might actually watch it too because I think I've only seen it once, and I wasn't as crazy about it as most people are. So, yeah, I think
I
they have a
liked that
few of
one
his
that we
films.
saw. I don't know where we went. I don't think it was the New Beverly, but we went and saw that Virgin Spring or whatever one. That was pretty good.
It was the New Beverly. I think it
Oh,
was
was that
there.
New Beverly? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think it was a double feature. I'm not sure if it was with Wild Strawberries. Might have been something else,
I don't
but
think
yeah,
it was, but maybe it was.
no, maybe I think I'm not sure if it was, but yeah. In any case, how about you, Matt?
Well, this is kind of difficult. I mean, it's not, like a perfect movie like, you know, Schindler's List or City of God or White Chicks or anything.
Always going
Um,
back to White Chicks.
uh, I honestly, yeah, I think it's a 9 at least for me. Probably a 9.5. But I mean, like this is, I mean, for me, the Seventh Seal is a 9.5, and Wild Strawberries is like, you know, on par with the Seventh Seal, like maybe a notch lower for me. So yeah, this is one of my favorite movies. So I'm trying to reserve my tens for like just blew my brain out of my head. You know, I can't. Can't really articulate how much I love this movie. Kind of movies, and this came close, but it's not quite there. So yeah, that's the only reason why I'm not giving it 10 out of 10. Yeah, it's like a 9.5.
Cool. It's still pretty high praise,
Yeah,
higher than I gave it before. Um,
yeah,
yeah,
Matt,
I actually had this idea, like maybe at some point we should do a shorter episode, not today, of discussing our tens. Think about
yeah,
like which movies we would rate a 10 and kind of discuss them and why we give them a 10. Because giving a 10
yeah,
is almost, you shouldn't do that. But on IMDb, just for fun, because nobody cares, it's just stupid ratings.
yeah.
It's just like, giving our rationalization for every 10 that we've given.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm all for it. Yeah.
yeah.
I'd have to give me some advance notice before we do that because I have not been keeping track of things using IMDb. So
Yeah, me neither. I'm sure there's some movies that I've seen since because I took a good 10, 15 year gap of not ratings. So I'm sure there's some movies that I've seen in those years maybe I would have given a 10 to. So
Yeah,
anything's possible. But
yeah,
just
I would
whatever you see on IMDb,
I
could
would
be.
just need to basically make a list prior to talking about it because
yeah,
I don't have it ready to go.
yeah,
Yeah, oh no, for sure.
yeah. I don't think I've given a rating on IMDb in the last 16 years or something. But anyway,
Yeah. Anywho.
uh,
Okay,
uh,
cool.
all right.
So getting into spoilers. I guess we
Yeah.
got a bit into it, but not too far. We can start with you, Matt. What was your quibble?
Okay. Okay. So my quibble was that okay. So the first well, actually we've been talking about this dream sequence, vision, projection, whatever. The first sequence that we had cinematographically very clearly was shot. Uh, I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but you're shooting black and white. You use a bunch of color filters in front of the lens in order to adjust the contrast of the light that's passing through and actually hitting the film. The first sequence was very clearly shot with a red filter, at the very least, an orange filter. So it was extremely high contrast. The skin tones were just absolutely white. And it's the only scene in the movie that was handled that way. And yet we had several more dream sequences, visions, projections, so on and so forth, and they weren't handled in the same way. And yeah, and this is why it's a quibble and not a problem. I still got it when I was in the vision, projection, whatever, dream, so on and so forth in the movie, but there wasn't any visual congruity after that first scene. None of them were handled in the same way visually. And that kind of bothered me.
The first sequence, the first dream sequence, um, it's about him seeing his death. Like it's about him seeing himself
Yeah,
as a dead
right.
person. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure of the specifics of the other ones, but there was one that was a very pure dream, and maybe it's the fact that they wanted to be overexposed and very expressive, because it was setting up the tone for the rest of the movie. But maybe then once they got into more back and forth with the flashbacks and projections, or at least, or I think he's got one more dream there. He falls asleep in the car one more time. That maybe they felt like it's good to be consistent, and maybe the overexposure is mainly just for that one scene where he sees himself like dead in the coffin.
Yeah,
It's like the Luke Skywalker cave scene.
In a way, like it was just a particular scene they wanted to do it, but to stay committed to that, maybe they felt like wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. There's still a shift in color between the depending on the mood of the sequence. Like sometimes it's very bright in some of the projection slash flashbacks, and then it gets dark when he goes back with the scene with the baby towards the end of the movie.
Yeah.
So they definitely play with light. Let's just say that they're very specific about the use of light in this movie.
yeah,
There's no doubt.
The scene with the wife is also significantly darker than like the stuff with Sarah.
Yeah. So I think it's definitely very intentional. Let's just say it wasn't a mistake that it was overexposed or that there was inconsistency.
No, I don't think that it was a mistake. I don't think that they were just like, oh shit, we overexposed the scene or something. I think that it was a deliberate decision. It's just something that, for me, I view it as something that stuck out like a sore thumb in a way that maybe the filmmakers didn't intend it to stick out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, I mean, when I watched
But
it, I think when I watched it like a second or a third time, I did when I was more into cinematography, like, oh yeah, that scene is completely overexposed. But then I know that it's a dream sequence. There's a clock with no, with no that you
Hands,
can't tell
arms.
that with no hands, and then once it hits you, once he sees himself, okay, like this is like they're just kind of pushing it as far as possible. I mean, there's also the faceless man.
yeah,
It's just a very abstract dream, very
yeah,
abstract. It's the most abstract dream of the movie in a way, and it starts it off. But I can totally understand someone seeing that and saying like, maybe they went a bit too far. Maybe it wasn't necessary to overexpose it. Maybe if there's going to be a lot of other sequences that are
well,
similar.
I mean, honestly, I would have liked it if they had done more red filter kind of stuff. But also, I mean, it's 1957, and anybody who was shot on black and white film knows that if you throw a red filter in front of your camera, it kills two stops of light. So, like, it's not really feasible to
Exactly. I
do
guess they
that,
could only do it in
all the
broad
time.
like daylight with the
Yeah,
sun
right.
out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this was 1957, and so I mean, the fastest film that they had. Well, actually, still to this day, the fastest black and white film that we have is 200 ISO. So, that's gonna, really inhibit you. But also to that point, a scene in the movie that gained some points back for me cinematographically was one of the flashback scenes in the car where they actually they're sitting in the car in the rain, and there's a hard light going through the windshield, and you're actually seeing the projection of the light on the projection of the rain on the faces. And Conrad L. Hall is famous for that, for In Cold Blood, which came out 10 years after this movie. So, I mean, if anything, I don't think that Conrad L. Hall consciously stole it from Wild Strawberries, but, somebody beat Conrad L. Hall to it. So, anyway.
And here I was thinking that with Wild Strawberries, we weren't going to get our, Matt's cinematography rant.
Yeah. Well, the cinematography is really good. Even though it is a very talky movie, it is fairly good. I even brought up cinematography before, so that's how good it is.
No, I just meant when he started saying earlier on that he's like, I got some problems with this movie. I was looking this up, and I was like, oh, he's gonna be like, this Gunnar Fisher guy's like a fucking hack or something. I don't know.
Oh, he shot the Seventh Seal, right? But yeah, it's not Sven Nykvist. I was actually looking it up, and it's was this shot by Sven Nykvist? Because is Matt shitting on Sven Nykvist?
No, I would happily perform fellatio on Sven Nykvist.
What was that?
The Bergman's mainstay cinematographer. At least I think throughout the '60s and most of his movies. But
he also shot Celebrity for Woody Allen and a few other Hollywood films. But the man was a genius.
One thing I will say, since we're now going to spoilers and stuff, as far as my my reaction to the movie when I first saw it, and of course now, it reminds me of Akiru, and we mentioned it also in one of our discussions. It's a very complete movie about summing up a life. That's usually done best with older people. Also, although sometimes it could be interesting with younger people too. But this does it really well. It's just the whole generational thing. Yep. They literally in the car, they have a scene when they pick up the husband and wife in the accident. They have a car with 3 benches, and the first bench is the old man with his daughter-in-law, and then in the middle you have the husband and wife, which is one generation below him, and then behind them on the third bench is the younger kids, the hitchhikers, and it's just perfect. That's perfect storytelling. That's how you tell a story. It's visual. It's amazing. What he does there, and it's so simple. And he tells the story about this guy's missed opportunities, dreams that didn't happen, lost love. The opportunity that he had to be with I guess the whatever cousin or something, and then she ended up being with his brother or something. So it's all these little touches of summing up a life, but he's doing it from the perspective of a person that is cold and disliked. And that's the thing that I mostly connected with, because I've always struggled with that as well. I've also had the reputation for being, not as empathetic or, cold at times or too rational, and seeing movies like this.
Yeah, and I've never liked you, so
for sure.
But no, I hear you.
Yeah, but
Uh,
I think watching a movie like this, and that's the whole thing, is that he even knows this. He even understands this, but at the same time, there's these characters, like the what's his face in the gas station, the little cameo
Max von
by
Sydow.
Mike Van Sydow, the young at the time. Yeah, so that they really respect him for everything that he's done, and by the end, his daughter-in-law realizes that she was wrong. Like she realizes that really he's a good person. It's just that often it's the impression, the
Mhm.
art, the not artificial, but the what's the shallow? What's the word for
The
shallow?
surface.
Yeah, on the surface, yeah, the superficial. That's the word. On a superficial level, people can be perceived in a certain way, whether it's snobbish or. But ultimately, we're all humans. We all have our bad sides or our good sides. We're all humans. We're all flawed, and ultimately, we're all redeemable. We're all lovable. We all deserve to be loved, and we all try to love. And I think that's what this movie is about, in a way. And it just does it so fully. It just really doesn't miss anything. It just really nails the whole thing. And it's even got a little like blurb about like arguments about God and religion and stuff, which is always fun with Bergman. Um, so it's just got everything. It's really one of those movies that just connects for me on so many levels, which is why I think it's my favorite of his. What's the reason for? I think even the reviews that I'm reading on IMDb from the critics, a lot of them also feel like that it's one of his best movies. So I'm not sure why the people at the Facebook group, like if it doesn't come up as often, but yeah, it's just a really strong movie. It's very tough for me to find flaws in it. I actually, when I was watching it this time, I really tried to look for them, but I was like, yeah, it's slow at times, but it's not too slow. It's an hour and 30 minutes, and it's a road
Yeah.
movie. It's honestly, it's not even that boring. I was trying to see like where's the pacing issue here, because there's always going to be some pacing issues in these movies, and it's like solid through and through. It's just it's one of those movies for me. I can't explain it.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh,
but I guess Jason, what do you feel like as far as I
There
guess
was a couple of things I was just going to comment on, not like in any particular order or anything, but like
mm,
you mentioned earlier, how this movie, um, I guess you could say it's well, certainly not unique, but it's different because it's not like just doing your stereotypical flashbacks like we touched on. It's kind of like they're like him viewing stuff that he wasn't actually there for, but had a massive impact on his life, kind of thing and stuff. The first one, not the one Matt was talking about, not the dream sequence, the actual dream sequence, not the Luke Skywalker cave sequence, but the one uh, with Sarah picking the strawberries, and then the brother shows up. Um, I was watching that, and I mean, a lot of times when you're watching a movie, especially for the first time or whatever, you're not always like 100% remembering everybody's names and stuff. And so, like, he talks about the strawberries. He's kind of like thinking back in his memory as a kid or whatever, and it goes into a flashback. And in my head, just because I've watched thousands of movies and whatever, I'm immediately thinking, okay, here's this, almost like what you said, almost like a Citizen Kane thing. I was like, okay, so this is going to be like a young love thing, and here's the hot girl, and she's picking strawberries and stuff like that, and he's going to come up, and then this dude shows up, and he does look like he could be a younger version of him, you know, and so my brain immediately thought, okay, this is him, and then he comes up, and he's he's really hitting on her, you know? And I was like, wow, it's like in his youth, he was very, very forward. And then she even says something like, leave me alone, I'll tell Isak, I'll tell your brother. And I was like, oh, damn. Like, that ain't even him. That sucks. Like, oh man, this girl's getting hit. Like, oh, his woman's like, having to put up with the brother, like trying to make a play. That sucks, And I just like being that that's like the first one, it's like sets you up for all the rest of them. And I was like, man, it's like a lot of it goes to that whole melancholy nature of a lot of the movie. It's like a lot of really unfortunate things. She was so desperate to be, in her eyes, to be good for him, and yet she's like surrendering to this other guy's advances.
Yeah. No, I think a lot of it is pretty much about everything we could be or everything that could have been but was not.
Yeah.
And maybe in a way the son, like his son, he's his symbolism in a way, he sort of represents a more extreme version of his dad. I guess every generation just becomes more extreme, but he's even colder than his dad. He doesn't even want to have kids. He doesn't feel like kids should be brought into this cruel world because he's just so jaded about everything. Where his dad is not that jaded. He's just skeptical about life, or at least just keeps wondering what could have been or what was, and not being able to put all the pieces together, maybe until towards the end where you can finally rest. And there's the scene with the parents in the end, which is like a great, like an amazing ending for me. It's like, it reminds me of La Dolce Vita too. That's also like when you end on a face of a character and it really just nails something, definitely works for me. But yeah, that's why it's a very generational movie. It's all
Yeah.
about how each of these generations have to struggle with the burden of life. It is a burden. Like, life is not always happy, but I think he realizes that, and I think they realize as well. That's why at the end the son compromises and he decides that she can have the baby, and they're gonna stay together because ultimately it's the to be or not to be. Like, so are you gonna kill yourself or are you gonna live? Might as well just live. You're already here, and unless
Yeah.
you're gonna like just
Mhm.
jump out of a building or a bridge tomorrow, you might as well make the best of it, which is what the son realizes in the end. And what the dad realizes in bed, he realizes, like, you know what? I haven't been the perfect human being. Some people liked me, a lot of people didn't like me, but I've done the best that I can, and I'm okay with it. I'm whole with it, and that's what the movie is, I think, trying to say. And it's,
And,
Well, I
yeah.
think
and,
he's
and,
also
and,
kind of happy for the son too, right? I mean, like, because like the in the car, the girl opens up to him and literally like says something about seeing the pattern, right, from the ancient mom who's like 98 years old or something like that, to Isak, to the son or her husband, whatever. And she's got a child inside of her, and she's like, holy crap, this like kid is destined to be miserable and lonely. And then, like, he sees at the end that his son, despite being frustrated and pissed off about the situation, he's he's genuinely like committed to being with his wife. And so it's like, even if stuff bothers him in the future, he sees that there's probably some sort of cycle being broken there, right? Because he's going to not be alone.
Yeah, but also I feel like in that scene with the mother, with Isak's mother, um, she also finally has sympathy for him because she sees where it comes from.
Yeah.
It's all generational. Like he was doomed to be who he was, and this is all the going back to the
When you
discussion
say
of
she, you mean the stepdaughter, right?
the stepdaughter. Yeah,
Yeah.
she has finally she has that's when she has some compassion for him because she realizes that wow, if this is his mother and she's such a cold bitch.
Yeah.
No wonder that he's struggled with being empathetic, likable, and no wonder that that his son is struggling with the same ailment. And as far as the future of the unborn baby is, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. You can only hope that with time that there's a chance for the next generation maybe to find their own way, but they have to find it themselves, and the only way to do that is to give them birth. You can't just
Yeah.
end it right there because then we're doomed.
I also think that there's a bit of significance that needs to be brought in with the I mean it didn't turn into a fist fight, but like a kind of a puny shoving fight between the two men in the back of the car who
Two
had a
suitors.
disagreement about whether or not God exists. I mean, I think that there's some symbolism there in terms of like meaning, and I mean, fundamentally, how do you get past that in terms of like a conversation about meaning, especially in 1957? Like there's a fundamental philosophical clash there. And I mean, I think that has to be pretty much the only reason why in a 90-minute movie they decided to put that in there, to just kind of talk about eventually, like, well, eventually you're going to die and you have to examine why you've been on this world, why you've been on this planet, why you've actually existed. And I mean, yeah, that little shoving match was basically a microcosm of the whole philosophical nature of the entire freaking movie.
Yes, no, for sure. He didn't just have
But
the argument at the table and then later on they're fighting. I think that, and then of course the professor, like Isaac, like sort of takes the high road or the middle ground. He says he doesn't want to admit whether he believes in God or not. And that's a very old person thing to say. Is like, does it really matter?
yeah,
It doesn't really. Ultimately, it just all it does is create conflict and fighting, and just letting people be whatever they are or believe what they want to believe is probably the best way to go, which is not very Bergman like, because Bergman made several movies that are very anti-religion, but in this movie, this is why I think is one of his wisest movies. Is it really just often says I don't know, we don't know. Like we want to be as objective as possible about this idea of life, whether it's from a perspective like a religious perspective, a epistemological perspective. It's all just we're just a bunch of animals, essentially, like
yeah,
intelligent animals going through life, and life is difficult, and it's got a lot of emotions and a depression and consequences and memories, and you sort of have to just deal with it. And this is a bunch of people dealing with it, and in various ways at various periods of their lives, depending on the character. And yeah, and it's melancholy, but like Jason said, it's very life affirming. It's very hopeful,
hmm
even though it's a very depressing movie.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think the it's worth mentioning that the actress who plays Sarah, well, the two Sarahs, I guess, or whatever.
Yeah, BB Anderson.
Yeah, she was really good because it's like, I mean, you get to see the it's two different. I mean, it's not separated by a massive stretch, but it is two different kind of time periods, I guess, in a way. And the young kid is like so, modern and so, in your face, and she's playing two extremely different characters, even though like he mentions that he sees similarities in them, but the way they talk and the way they're dressed and the way they act is so different, and it's a pretty interesting thing to see the scenes back to back when they have little visions and flashbacks and such.
Yeah, and the funny thing, I have to admit that I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is the first time that I noticed that she's the same actress. I
I
really,
wasn't sure. I wasn't sure. I wanted to see when I looked it up on IMDb, and there's like a little slash thing. I was like, oh, she was the same one. Okay.
yeah, because Bibi Anderson is a pretty famous actress. I'm not super familiar with most of her work. I know she was in Persona and like a few Bergman, I think Seven Seal too.
Yeah.
But yes, obviously we see these movies every once in a while, and I'm not too familiar, except for, of course, even though she's not in this movie, but Liv Ullmann is in a ton of like Bergman movies, so I'm very familiar with her. But yeah, it's tough. Like there's a lot of faces, and sometimes if they look different, it's you might not recognize there's the same actor.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's an interesting choice. It's
She just died 2 years ago.
Bibi Anderson.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I recall something about that. That's what it came to my mind too. And then I realized that she was in this movie. It's like, oh wow, yeah, because I really there's the whole, yeah, like Sven Nykvist. There's um, Max von Sydow and like Liv Ullmann. They were on a bunch of Bergman stuff, but some of the actors I just less familiar with. Like, they don't show up as much.
I haven't seen enough of his movies to tell you where I would place it.
Oh yeah, rankings, right?
I've only
Um,
seen 3.
Yeah, I could definitely do that. It's but yeah, so many of them I've seen so few times, so it's tough. But it's the funny thing. I'm rewatching Scenes from a Marriage because I watched the HBO remake recently, and and we decided to watch the original one, the Scenes from a Marriage that Bergman did, and
It kind of seems like sacrilege to remake a Bergman movie, but
well, it's a Bergman miniseries, so that was
yeah,
converted to a movie, and it's pretty faithful to the spirit of it. And apparently, I think Bergman's son was involved in the production,
oh,
uh,
okay.
but
Well,
it's pretty good. It's not it's probably not as good as the original, although I'm watching it now, but it's just different. But and it's got the role of flip the roles, like I think in the original the man cheats, but here the woman cheats, so it modernizes the story a bit to like mix it up in an interesting way. And yeah, and Oscar Isaac
oh,
and so good.
Jessica Chastain.
Jessica Chastain. Yeah,
oh,
so good.
okay.
Yeah, Oscar Isaac and Jessica Chastain, they're both very good in it,
Well, they're
for
both
sure.
very good in almost everything.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's a good cast. In any case, as far as like ranking Bergman films, the ones I've seen, let's say if we start from top to bottom, I think Wild Strawberries, I think The Virgin Spring is definitely up there for me. I really like that one. Um, Cries and Whispers is really good. Persona might be the number two movie for me. It's definitely, if you're going to see another Bergman movie, Persona might be worth it. Hour of the Wolf. I think Hour of the Wolf was the one that we saw with Virgin Spring, if I'm not mistaken. That's
Maybe.
the horror movie that he did, which a lot of people love, and I liked it, but it's not my favorite of his.
Mhm.
Um,
Hour
and
of the Wolf.
Hour of the Wolf, and then there's Through the Glass Darkly. Through a Glass Darkly, which I had high expectations for. I think it was mostly okay, not amazing. The Seventh Seal, yeah, I think top five would probably be Wild Strawberries, Persona, um, The Virgin Spring, The Seventh Seal, and Cries and Whispers. Cries and Whispers is a weird one, but I think it's also worth a look. It's in color, and I think it's Sven Nykvist. But I remember for some reason like um, that movie. Yeah, Cries and Whispers, like the use of color there. It's like his Vertigo. Like he really like the cinematography there is like gorgeous, and it uses color really well, and I don't know. It's just one that really stuck with me for sure. Or is it
Yeah.
1972? Yeah, so those are like just I guess standout ones, the ones that I mentioned. But
Yeah,
yeah,
and Cries and Whispers was Sven Nykvist.
Sven
So
Nykvist.
yeah, um, yeah, I would pretty much agree with your rankings. Only I would put the Seventh Seal higher, but I mean that's just again a quibble. It's not even like, oh well, no shit, Seventh Seal is clearly better. It's just personal preference, and they're all great movies. Cries and Whispers really fucked with my head though. So, but yeah, I mean, it's still a great movie. I mean, a lot of great movies fucked with my head, but that movie really fucked with my head. Um, so yeah, but um,
Yeah, and at the same time, I guess
yeah,
it's good to mention. I mean, the ones of his that I wasn't crazy about were mainly, I guess it's the two that were made that were converted from a miniseries to a movie, and maybe that's because they were condensed that it didn't work for me. But
mm,
Fanny and Alexander is a famous one of his, and Scenes from a
mm,
Marriage. Both those movies, they essentially took a 6 7 hour miniseries and turned it into a 3 hour movie, and both of them didn't work great for me. Like I liked them, I
mm.
found value in them, but they're not nearly as good as the other movies that we mentioned. And it might have been just the way that they were cropped down to fit a movie length.